Brandon Rink. You can find his work on OrangeandWhite.com. I'm Marty Coleman. I blog from Mom's Basement. Brandon, it's almost time for, you know what? Football season will be upon us shortly. And what other way would we start off the season besides talking about the quarterback? All spring long, we've heard Cole Stout is the starter, and he's earned that position. Then this week, I believe you had some media availability with the coaches, and we heard Deshaun Watson will play. One headline I saw was early and often. Give me your take on how much action Watson sees and when that will occur.
Well, it makes sense that he's going to play, this season. You don't have Chad Kelly there. Of course, Dabo and Chad have said that, he was going to play regardless, that he's got the talent, that he was going to get on the field. And, as a true freshman, it kind of, makes you wary that are wary of it, that, he's going to be in there right away. But he is the quarterback of the future. He is super talented, and he's going to be a guy that they know they wouldn't create certain packages for him. They didn't think he was going to add something to the game. Morris isn't a guy that's going to be, forcing a guy on the field without knowing that he can make an impact. So we had, we did those preseason projections, and I think my number's a little lower than maybe I think they're going to be now. I think he's going to be in the triple-digit snap range this year. It's just going to be a matter of, how many situations he's going to have to play.
Yeah, for me, that's the interesting part, is trying to figure out when he gets into the game and how. Past history has shown that it's difficult to pre-plan the flow of a game, and especially a game like if the Georgia game ends up being like the Georgia game last year, where one series is the difference between winning and losing. It's hard to see where that Watson fits into that scheme, and obviously Chad Morris is much more knowledgeable than I am, but it'd really be interesting to see how they plan on fitting him into the game, and what that means for Clemson. And not just the first week, going forward with South Carolina State and Florida State in week 3.
Yeah, you wonder if he's going to maybe start some series out. It seems like with an offense that is so built on tempo and rhythm that they're not going to, have, Stout running and getting a few first downs, and then all of a sudden you bring in Watson and it breaks up the flow. So it seems like maybe out of a timeout you may bring him in, or, there has to be a certain plan, and I think Morris is a guy that he writes and rewrites his play sheet all throughout the week. He's a guy that is all about the plan. So I would expect that, they'll have a pretty good, situation for Watson to come in.
So you're thinking scripted maybe by series, like he comes in the third series or the fourth series or whatever.
I would think so.
Okay. Well, one of the issues that I mentioned as we discussed this podcast was looking at the depth chart on the offensive line. There are 11 names were listed there, and that sounds fine and dandy, but then you realize that 2 of those names belong to Shaq Anthony at 2 different positions, one to David Beasley, and those guys won't be playing in the Georgia game, so that immediately knocks you down to 8 that were on the offensive line. And some of those 8 don't have much, if any, experience. Joe Gores has 124 snaps over 2 years. Tyrone Crowder, of course, is a redshirt freshman, which gives him 0 snaps in his career. McLean, I believe, may have a few snaps, but not many. For me, when I look at that offensive line, it doesn't look like a ton of experience, at least in the first game because of the suspensions. What's your take on that offensive line and how they will perform against Georgia, which not a great defense, but, I hate to say it, but an SEC defense.
It's certainly not an ideal makeup for the opener. You like to have Beasley in there because he's one of those guys that's played, 500-some snaps last year. You got Anthony, who has, I think he logged right around that amount at tackle too. So you're losing that, and then you've got Joe Gore, who's played less than 100 snaps the last 2 years, and he's had some chronic sort of knee injury issues, and he's had surgery on that. So we really just haven't seen him have an opportunity to play enough. And, you're losing Brandon Thomas, who was versatile. He was a guy that walked down the left tackle the last 2 years, earning all ACC honors. You're feeling pretty good about center, either Ryan Norton or Jay Guillermo. And Guillermo's a guy that he's so much bigger than Norton. I mean, he outweighs him by 30-some pounds almost. So he's a guy that maybe you can move at guard if you need him at left guard in that first game, in place of David Beasley. Eric McLean's a guy that Caldwell and Morris have talked a lot about, and he should get on the field, probably starting the left guard in that first game. He's a guy that can move it to tackle as well if you need him there. Kalen Davis, he's solid at guard. Maybe his ideal spot by the end of the year is at right tackle. But it's definitely unsettled going in the first game. I think Caldwell is very confident in the depth, going into the season, but that doesn't help you when you're starting at Athens.
Once they get Beasley and Anthony back, what do you see long term? You mentioned Guillermo, potentially maybe a better option at center. But what do you see along that line long term, assuming first Beasley and Anthony get back for game 2 forward, and no one else, and there's no injuries, which there will be. But sitting here preseason, how do you see this line working out? What do you believe is the best combination long term?
It's tough to say. Obviously Battle is, he's got left tackle. I think pretty easy to assume he's going to be there. You would think that Beasley's going to play. I mean, he's got experience. He's a big guy. I think he's a guy that really fits at left tackle. Norton, he started all last season at center. He's had some shoulder issues. He's a little underweight compared to Guillermo, but he's had, you want that center quarterback, sort of connection there, and I think he's probably got that with Stout by now. Davis, it's just a matter of who you would put at right guard if you do make Davis out the right tackle. Maybe you move Eric McLean to right guard, have Beasley at left guard, and then have Davis on tackle. Because I think tackle, it sort of screams out to you that he looks like a tackle. Maybe not left tackle, but, right tackle may fit for him.
Okay, yeah. We've seen in the past, they've had some success moving guys around within the offensive line and actually guys that weren't on the offensive line, like Tyler Shatley, turned into pretty good players. So we've seen some success in the past moving guys around. Hopefully the same will happen this year until this line gets settled. At the end of the line is the tight end position. Ever since Dwayne Allen left, we've seen a steady decline in the use of that position, the targeting of passes, and I would say the blocking, just all around reduction in production. Coming out of the spring, Sam Cooper's listed as the starter with Jordan Leggett and Stanton Seconder listed as the backup. I kind of see this as a three-headed monster in my mind. Cooper as primarily a blocker, Leggett as the perhaps big play guy, and Seconder as the steady hands. Kind of like it takes all three of them to make up for Dwayne Allen or even Brandon Ford to some extent. What are your thoughts on the tight end position for 2014?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that assessment. I think they're going to have about as much production, probably more than they've had even at any point in the Morse offense and maybe in recent history with Clemson. I think that's a good, solid group they have there. And Jordan Leggett seems like a guy that's primed to make that next step. He's going to be tough to handle. He's tall, but he still moves like a receiver. You got the same deal with Stan Seconder. Seconder is going to be solid. He's going to be a guy that they can get first downs with. And it seems like Stout really has a good relationship with Leggett, which really helps because, Danny Pierman, the tight ends coach, was saying that Leggett's probably, and it's really not that hard to see, but Leggett's probably that sort of star option at tight end that can really, break a game open and, a great target in the red zone for sure. So you figure that they're going to take the next step there, and you figure it's going to be a bigger part of the offense just because you're losing so many targets and Sammy Watkins, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second, and you're losing, just losing some of that sort of surefire guy at receiver where these tight ends have been around for another year, and, this should be pretty reliable targets.
Yeah, we'll get to the wide receivers in just a second, but I couldn't let the tight end position go by without wondering if you've seen J.J. McCullough around, or is he missing in action somewhere? Last we saw him, he looked like Herschel Walker against the Citadel, but nowhere to be found on the depth chart.
He's kind of molded into that H-back, that sort of like what Darryl Smith was, maybe H-back fullback. And, apparently he's going to be getting some carries this year. They've seen enough, from what he was doing in that game that, they're going to hand him the ball sometimes. And I don't think he's going to be maybe your straight, true tight end where he's lining up maybe in the slot, or, he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be in a more, heavy package, run situations.
So like almost like a second tight end, but in the backfield, as in the old Chad Deal days.
Yeah.
Interesting, really interesting. He, you have to take into account the competition, but he sure looked smooth running the ball. So that'll be interesting to see. Well, you mentioned wide receivers, and Clemson has likes to bill itself as, or some of the fans at least, as wide receiver U. Sammy Watkins, obviously, Buffalo Bills, and Martavis Bryant is gone. And we look at the wide receivers this season. Adam Humphries is at the, and correct me if I'm wrong, I always get these numbers mixed up, as you know, at the 2 position, which it was Sammy's position, I believe. Backed up by true freshman Artavis Scott. Mike Williams is at the 9, which is Martavis Bryant's old spot. Damari Kitt is listed as his backup, another true freshman. In the slot is at the 5 is Jerome Peak, and backed up by Kieran Priester or Jermone Hopper. First thing I wanted to touch base on these guys is I have no doubt that Adam Humphries will catch the ball. I think if anything the last 3 years have shown us is that Humphries can catch the ball. My question is, what happens after the catch? We saw in the opener last year, Sammy caught a 14-yard pass over the middle from Tosh Boyd, ducked his head, bowled over the defensive back, and went all the way for a touchdown that answered a Georgia touchdown. My question is, what happens on that type of play this year? And the Tigers obviously don't expect Humphries to be Sammy Watkins, but how do you think he's going to perform in almost a no-win situation for him to be compared to Sammy Watkins?
Yeah, you're not going to see that play all the time. That's a once in a generation receiver's talent that you had in Sammy Watkins. So obviously, you're not going to see some of those plays, but we're going to see in Humphries is a guy that's been so reliable in terms of, he has the highest catch rate of any receiver the last 2 seasons. He gets, when it's thrown his way, he comes down with it, and a lot of it's because of those quick passes. But, he's going to be able to make some moves, get upfield, get some first downs, but obviously it's not going to be Sammy Watkins. He's going to be a guy that he can get downfield. He improved his yards per catch average to 11.8, and I have him right around 12 yards per catch this season. And he can get downfield. He had a couple of long touchdowns against Syracuse last year that Syracuse secondary had some issues because they were watching Sammy Watkins every move, but we know Humphreys can get downfield and get in position, and we know that Chad Morris is pretty good at that sort of sleight of hand, backfield motion, getting their eyes off kind of plays, and so he's going to get downfield for a few more scores this year.
Yeah, I believe, as I said, he's going to catch the ball. His challenge is going to be afterwards. He seems like he's short area. He has short area quickness, but obviously not that breakaway speed that Sammy had. Mike Williams is a guy who I think is going to be a superstar. Big, tall, rangy, and catches the ball. I'm not sure what else you could ask for. What do you foresee with Williams replacing Martavis Bryant this season?
I think he takes the next step. I'm not sure he's going to have quite the breakout season that Bryant had last year, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be at 40 catches, around 700 yards. But I think his biggest thing is going to be getting in the end zone. I think he's a guy that can be maybe the one double-digit touchdown guy that Clemson had, that they've had in Watkins, that they had in Hopkins. The coaches just gush about him every time they talk about him in terms of when they're not talking about how he may have some focus issues here and there, but when they're talking about on-field performance, they're always drawn to that comparison to Nuke Hopkins, and just because they both have that basketball background, they both can just get up in the air and come down with it. And he's going to be a guy that, he's going to be that target in the red zone that is going to be valuable for Stout this season.
And it's not bad. It's not a bad thing to be compared to a number one draft pick either.
No.
And we've seen that. We saw that last year. He can go up and get the ball. Hesitate to make these kind of comparisons, but it's kind of like that. Not quite as tall or as big, but kind of like Calvin Johnson at Georgia Tech. A few times we saw him, Williams last year, just go up and grab the ball away from the defender when you thought he had no chance at pulling the ball down. So I expect big things from Mike Williams this season. Sharon Peak in the slot. 100%? I think that's what we heard. Do you think he's 100%? Is that coach speak? Do we not know yet? And what do we expect from him this fall?
He says he's 100%, or he says that he's going to be 100%. Well, he said back in spring he was 100%, and the coaches believe that he's going to be 100% for summer workouts. And apparently, they've nominated him for first team All-ACC. So they certainly have expectations on him to be the guy that they've thought that he's going to be for a couple of years now. He was rated about as high or maybe higher than Sammy Watkins in that 2011 class, but we really haven't been able to see, what he can do downfield. They've thrown a lot of short passes to him. He's caught a few touchdown passes. We don't know what to expect from him this year. Is he going to be a guy that is going to, move the chains? Is he going to be like a Jerron Brown type that, third down, you know where to find Peak? Or is he going to be a breakout guy where you can throw it downfield? It's hard to really speculate because we really haven't seen him on the field enough to know what he's going to do. So I'm not sure what you can expect from him. I think he's going to be good, but I'm not sure he's going to be the best receiver Clemson has this year, but he certainly has the potential to be.
that slot, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that slot position is one traditionally, you mentioned Jerron Brown. We talked earlier about Humphreys running short routes, but that's a shorter route position. Yeah. So we shouldn't expect necessarily a lot of big plays. Jerron Brown had his share of them, and Humphreys had a couple here and there. But typically or traditionally, that's been a position that's, I don't want to call it a safety valve necessarily, but shorter routes as the 2 and the 9 positions are deeper on average, or typically, I should say. What about the backups at those positions? I think behind Peak are listed Priester and Hopper, who set out the spring, Artavis Scott and Tamari Kitt. Do you know anything about Priester, Scott, and Kitt?
Well, I know that Jeff Scott really likes Priester for his versatility. They think he can play pretty much any of the 3 receiver spots. Artavis Scott is maybe more of he's not as tall as Sammy, but he's sort of that, him and Kidd are maybe in that mold where I think they have that breakout star potential. Scott was a guy that was really good with punt returns. He's a guy that I think maybe can, fill a void on the return game that they've had the last few years. But yeah, I mean, they're all gonna play. I'm not sure how much Trevion Thompson's gonna play, not being an early enrollee. But, these guys are all going to play. They're all going to have their chance. It's just a matter of Pete, Humphreys, Williams are all guys with experience. It feels more like 2011 where Sammy Watkins walked in and he was the best player on the team. Maybe they would have, more catches, more yards, more of an impact. But we're just not sure how much they're going to break out from those guys.
Is Jerome Hopper out of the doghouse, or is that still to be determined?
I would say it's still to be determined. He's got to make it through fall camp with no incidents. Has to, work his way onto the field. It may be a thing where he could be a perfect citizen and still be not good enough to play. We don't really know. We've seen him in the end zone a few times. We've seen him targeted. I think you noted that he was targeted more than Mike Williams. So, They know where he is on the field. He gets open. It's just a matter of him working his way back and being right, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, he's the poster child for why I typically don't predict huge numbers for freshmen because he looked outstanding as a true freshman, I believe, in fall drills. And then in the spring game a couple of years ago, he looked great. And he looked pretty good in the South Carolina State game last year, scoring 2 touchdowns. But other than that game, part of it's the routes. They're very short. A lot of those were the shuffle passes behind the line of scrimmage or right at the line of scrimmage. So he didn't have a whole lot of opportunity other than South Carolina State. But I predicted stardom for him. So I'm pulling for him to make me not look totally crazy and out there in left field. But we'll see how that happens. I thought it was interesting. I think I did read on the internet, so it had to be true. Read on the internet that he's been a model citizen since his springtime escapades. Now, this is going to be my favorite position to talk about, even more than quarterback, because of the wide and varied opinions on who is going to lead Clemson in rushing, who is going to be the lead running back, who's going to tote the mail for the Tigers. Coming out of the spring, it was DJ Howard, followed by your favorite player, Brooks, and C.J. Davidson, or Wayne Gallman. I've had a poll up on my site for a while, and my readers, at least those that voted, think Howard was the worst of the 7 options that were listed, including one guy who's not even going to make it on the team this fall, it looks like. But in general, I think it's a fair enough statement to say that Clemson fans aren't sold on DJ Howard. What do you think about the running back position in 2014?
Wayne Gallman, the people's champ. He's the guy that everyone has. He's the guy without a college carry.
At least the 50 that voted on my site think he's going to be the guy.
Yeah, it's I think this year the operative word is by committee. Yeah, maybe that's 2 words, but they're gonna give a bunch of guys a shot. There may not be a Rod McDowell in this group. Chad Morris was even saying at the golf outing, the media event, that he was surprised that Clemson had a 1,000-yard rusher. He was surprised that Hot Rod stepped up and became kind of the one guy. And it's a little surprising to me. I think you and me both had Hot Rod having a pretty decent year last year.
Right.
And, I think Elliott was saying that, he tends to favor, Tony Elliott, running back coach, he favors experience just because it's a tough offense to, sub for, sort of special situations. You need to be able to do everything. You need to be able to run, catch the ball in the backfield, pass protect. And you got to know the offense in and out. And DJ Howard is a guy that would know the offense in and out. He can do all those things. Zach Brooks has been around on campus, for a few years now. He's a guy that can do all those things. Wayne Gallman's been there for now 2 springs and 2 fall camps in. So he's a guy that he, would seem less experienced on paper, but, he's got knowledge of the offense, and he's a guy that the coaches really like. They think he runs really violently. He kind of brings that linebacker mentality. He played a lot of linebacker his last year at Grayson. So, it's going to be a by committee look, and, it could be really, who knows who's going to have that first carry against Georgia, and if they're even going to have the most carries against Georgia. Howard is a guy, Elliott said he was, he's the champ out of spring, and that it's going to take someone to knock him out to get to that top spot. So I'm not sure. I think Gallman has the potential to knock him out, but I think Howard is undervalued by, obviously, the Clemson fan base, and I think he's not undervalued by the coaches, and that's really what matters.
Absolutely. I think we heard also out of Dabo, saw a quote that he said that Adam Choice may be the most complete running back. So I'm not sure what that says about Howard, Brooks, or C.J. Davidson, but I thought it was an interesting comment.
He's bigger. I mean, he's kind of just stepping from off the high school football field to the college field. He's as big a guy as Clemson has in that backfield, and obviously that counts for something. But he's a former quarterback, so you figure he's got a pretty good vision, pretty good decision making, and it's going to matter for him of picking up pass protection, catching out of the backfield. But I think he's definitely going to see his share of playing time this year.
And that's it for part 1 of our preseason podcast. Check back in a couple of days for part 2, which will focus on defense and special teams. Before we get out of here, I wanted to give a shout out to Adam Ergel for the podcast artwork and all of the artwork on seldomusedreserve.com. Adam is a fine graphic artist and a Clemson graduate. If you find yourself in need of some graphic artist work, I suggest you contact Adam. He can be reached at adam.ergle@gmail.com. That's ADAMEARGLE @gmail.com. Or check out some of Adam's work at dribble3bs.com/Adam Ergle. That's DRIBBBLE.com /Adam Ergle.